Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Morse, and this is the Elevated Frequency Podcast coming to you currently live with, oh my gosh, how do I even introduce you? My lovely friend, longtime student, and community member of the Green Door Life, and kind of like soul path sister, I would say, Kendra Elms. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So happy that you're here. And for those of you who are listening, we're going to start to bring in these lovely podcast series of talking to more of our clients who have been with us, not just for 12 weeks, but sometimes over years. And the beautiful holistic experience that individuals are having now inside of their journey of health and consciousness, dare I say. And so, what's so cool about having Kendra on today is that I have known you, Kendra. I'll give a little bit of my background, then I'm going to pass it on to you. I have known you since I was 26. I'm now 42. So we're pushing over a decade easily. And during that time, I was running a personal training school in San Francisco, and you were a part of that group. And you had a wild experience that happened during that time. And so I'm going to pass that to you in a second. But so you were in that 6 month in person personal training cohort that I ran. And then we were apart and did our own thing. We actually moved very close together in Tennessee, you in Chattanooga, me in Nashville, which is so interesting. We didn't find that out until later. And then you came back into the Green Door in the nutrition capacity with a group that we ran. And then more recently, you've been involved in our newest offering, which is the Belonging Blueprint, which is looking at our nervous system and our archetypal patterns and strategies that we created to provide a sense of belonging for ourselves, although they might be outdated. So, what I love about this conversation is that there's so many ways that you have interacted, you and I have interacted, and how your journey has had such a beautiful journey arc or story arc, I could say, and how it's all becoming this confluence of things that are happening right now. And I'm just so excited to have the conversation to give you a chance to share your experience, but also to give the listeners an understanding of how health journeys are not linear and they are not a straight shot.
No.
And as we had talked about right before we clicked record here, was our experience in falling in love with the steps that relate to health and wellness. So, the first question that I have for you, Kendra, is where did your kind of health journey start? And what's been your relationship to it, like from here, kind of looking back at where your interest in health and your health journey started? It's a big question.
Ooh, we're just gonna dive right in. Okay,
Just start at the beginning.
great. Yeah, so it's interesting. First connection was in me, training to become a personal trainer. And I don't necessarily feel like that was a personal
Mm,
step in my journey, though of course it was. There
mhm,
are those things that you look back and you're like, you didn't know what you didn't know. And so I come from a deep movement background. I come from a dance background. And so I started teaching when I was very young, and moving into teaching personal training was a very natural evolution from teaching dance. You just get more into the science. And interestingly, during that time, I was like, I'm not interested in macros. I don't want to have anything to do with nutrition. So it's so funny that this is now how our journey has circled back to each other. And now where we are in the belonging blueprint together is, really now looking back and being able to see and reflect that that was trauma. And that
mm,
was a response to closing off to traumatic experiences that I had. Growing up a dancer is hard. Growing up a curvy dancer is hard. I come to the world with a larger body, a larger bone structure, and that's okay. Now, at almost 40.
mm,
So I came to you, I think I was 25 when we met.
mhm,
And so it's been a very like long woven path for me to really my self-discovery and my self-acceptance. And I feel like our paths have kind of like touched at these really pivotal moments in my life. And so that experience that you were talking about right after I became a personal trainer, or like, went through the certification with you, you and I were training together. We were working together.
Mhm.
And I was on my way to meet you in San Francisco and I got T-boned by a bus. So I waylaid, I hit my head on the windshield. I ended up with a concussion. My dad and my wife at the time came and picked me up. And that was our relationship at that moment actually became severed because
Uh-huh.
I was out of commission. And then my father passed away 5 months after.
No.
So I took the grief and I was like, here's a good place to stick it. Let's just put that right in that injury right there. And we'll hold on to that for a while
Yeah.
until it
Mhm.
feels safe. And then that was in 2013. And I think it took me about 10 years to accept that my father had died. I
Yeah.
just wasn't willing to
Uh-huh.
accept it. So I kept the grief there. I had a really hard time with movement. I went back to dance. I
Mm.
remember training and I would stick my hand in my bra because, this arm could do all the things. And this arm was like, we're not it. We don't have movement. We don't have mobility.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I really, really kind of safeguarded that. And then I met some really beautiful practitioners in Chattanooga, interestingly, that really helped me unwind that and go through the grief of that and really feel that
Mm.
somatically and let that go and let that process and let that move through.
Mm.
And I don't think grief is a process that you're ever really done with by any means. There's
Mhm.
this beautiful image where it's like grief is a marble, and people always say, grief shrinks. And I don't
Mhm.
think grief shrinks. I think grief stays the same size and we grow around it.
Mm.
And I think that that's kind of what has happened in these years. And then, coming back together with nutrition, I think was another like place of reclaiming who I am and being
Mhm.
ready to address these things that I wasn't necessarily ready to address. And it's so interesting having this conversation as we're starting where it's like, it's kind of me talking about pushing these things off and rebelling these things and not wanting to deal with them. And that in my like soul, I'm such a like dropped in person. I really,
Uh-huh.
I'm in the moment, I'm in my body, I'm very connected. And here I am being like, I push that off and I push that off. And so it's interesting to be like, hi, nice to meet you. Here's a part of my journey, which is part of it, but
Yeah.
it's only a piece of it. And so coming back together in the nutrition, I think I was really ready to heal that deep wound that I had from being on a diet from age 12. I was on a diet from age 12 to 21, constantly
Mhm.
told that you're not good enough. You're not, the way that you came out is not right. You have to change this. So that's hard. And it was the 90s. So, like, not only was it hard growing up as a dancer, but it was also in the 90s when, we're now back into that era where the thin body model type was the body type and no
Right.
longer the Marilyn Monroe, the
Mhm.
stronger, hippier, I always think of the female, the like carving of the
Yeah.
female.
Like Botticelli.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just, there's always been this soft feminine figure
Yeah.
that's been throughout our history. But then
Mhm.
in our modern times, it's been almost shameful to come into the
Mm.
world with that type of a body.
Right.
So, I've
Yes.
carried my bag of stuff with me for a long time and I was finally ready to deal with it. And, because our paths have done this, we stayed connected on social media. I love
Mhm.
social media for that, to be able to like keep a pin in somebody's life and be like, oh, what are they doing? And so of
Huh.
course I've, kept in touch with your journey and, the green door once I started to like look into it and realize what you're doing, I was like, "Gosh, that's what she's doing now. That's where her journey naturally evolved to. That totally makes sense." And so, being ready to dive in, it really ended up being so much more than just about nutrition in that nutrition container.
Yeah.
It's like you open one door and it's like, you're like, I'm walking in this door. And you're like, I have 7 more doors that I just opened. And I got it. Okay.
Yes.
So, that at this point now was a couple of years ago. So
Right.
I've been involved with the Green Door now for a couple of years, and it's really helped me learn and accept and just ground into who I am and have solace in, I just guess more information and knowing instead of just being like, Ma, that's something I can't deal with that. No, that's
Mm.
the nutrition science. I can't deal with that. I don't want to deal with macros. And you're like, I mean, but when you turn it around and it's not about food and diet and size and culture, and it's actually about fueling this
Mhm.
vessel that we're
Yes.
in that we need to fuel,
Mhm.
it looks very different and it has a very different shape and a very different context. And
Yeah.
a lot of meaning behind it, or meaning that you placed on top of it, you kind of start to get to peel back those layers and be like, that was my mom, that was my dance teacher, that was society, that was the 90s, and get down to the root of what is
Mhm.
actually there. And again, I think like grief is a journey, I think healing is a journey.
Mhm.
And so that's a journey that I've been on for the past couple of years. I kind of walked in the nutrition door, and then it's really unfolded to be so much more than that. And this belonging blueprint, now this new container that has been created, I think is really that juice for me, and that like meat and potatoes of, I think that for me, this work that we're working on now is, it's providing information that I wasn't even ready yet to unlock inside of the nutrition container.
Mm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's healing that's going on and unfolding with that even now, that I'm
Yeah.
looking at, that, I'm like, okay, cool, we did the nutrition container. Okay, we got that check.
Uh,
we're
yeah.
moving we're moving through the steps, we're moving through the things, but it is just, it's such an evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much gold in what you just shared. Thank you for sharing it so eloquently. And I want to reflect back on certain things that you shared already. One of it is about the the ability for our body to understand when it's ready to
Mm,
process something,
mhm.
something as big as grief and a physical trauma in the same time period. And there's parts of me where I'm sometimes curious because I really do believe that when we get injured, I think that there's actually bigger things happening in our life, and it's just a reflection of the bigger things happening in our life. And so I've had a couple of concussions as well. And when I think about when I had the concussions and what was occurring around them, there was actually a lot of like big shifts that were happening in my life simultaneously as the concussions. So there's part of me where it's like almost like the deja vu that we were talking about earlier. Like, which comes first? Is our body bracing so it is protecting itself from feeling the emotion of something that's coming, which could be quite interesting to even think about it that way?
Mhm.
Or does it come in the opposite, you know? So because you had the spine and the brain and the shoulder thing that was occurring, and then your father passed away, the dual thing perhaps helped to store it in your tissue even more deeply because it was happening. Like there's so many of these different things that we can kind of consider. And this is part of where somatic work and emotional release becomes so fascinating, of how we store memory in our tissue, and then also what coincides with it, with the emotion that is happening and what we're able to experience during certain periods of our life. And I think it's really beautiful that you are aware from where you are now when you didn't have the capacity to focus on certain things. And I think for so many people and for all of us, there's a part of us that sometimes makes it wrong and makes it shameful, or we rebel in it and we have some sort of story around it. And yet, my deepest belief is that things will show up when we have the capacity to process them.
Yeah.
And until then, we're doing something else with what with the capacity that we
Right.
have.
Right.
So I thought that that was really like it's just so interesting how that occurred, which then likely transported you onto this incredible journey of somatics in your own way. And perhaps if you had been able to look at nutrition earlier, your journey would have looked very different.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Yes. And then I love that you're highlighting this like kind of baggage that you carried around the belief of what our bodies were supposed to look like. I feel like that is such a prolific experience that so many of us have. And it's really interesting to watch even like generationally how it changes. But also, like I've noticed in my own physique where I've had like more muscle, it's almost in a period of my life where I have to protect myself more.
Interesting.
So just like looking at how our body is manifesting the way in which it feels like it has to survive or protect. A lot of times with individuals where we've gone on a weight loss journey and perhaps they're carrying 100, 150 pounds above what their like base weight could be for a healthy body composition. I actually noticed that individuals that are in that stage of their process have a hard time dropping into their body because it's too painful to feel what they've been storing. So I think it's really interesting to kind of broaden the conversation to be not only outside of what we were told or shown through media that it was supposed to look like, and actually start to shift it and go like, well, actually, what is my body protecting me from? Or how is my body surviving its environment right now? I think that slight shift can give us a little bit more opportunity to be curious, just like you were sharing with the slight shift in thinking about nutrition, where it goes from like it's supposed to look like this, you're supposed to like good, bad, right, wrong, like diet, cheat meal, like all of this like crazy jargon. And then you actually go into be like, "Oh, my body is a vessel that's literally keeping me alive. It's allowing me to do everything that I do throughout the day. Like my body is a temple. It's the temple that I live in every single day. I wake up in this temple. I go to sleep in this temple. This temple requires a lot of steps.
A lot of steps, always. So many steps.
Temple requires a lot of steps. For those of you, this is an inside joke that is now an outside joke. Before we started this podcast, we were talking about being on a hair journey and having lots of steps on hair journeys. And then we started talking about how a lot of times when you're on a new journey, whether it's a personal training journey or it's a nutrition journey or it's a hair journey, the initial steps feel very annoying and cumbersome and time consuming. And that as you continue with those steps and you get to see how your body responds, how your hair responds, how all these things respond, and you kind of find your groove, these steps are no longer quite as annoying.
Yeah.
You get to slowly fall in love with the steps. So that's essentially where we're arriving at. Last thing I wanted to share, so many things. As you're talking about the belonging blueprint, because we're right in the middle of it. Right now, we are in week 3. Week 3 is starting out of a 4-week container, 5 weeks if you include the introduction week. And this week is the week of the heart and the week of relating to others. But overarching inside of the belonging blueprint, what we're really doing is we're excavating beliefs that are not ours.
Yeah.
And when you shared about, the idea of nutrition and what nutrition was supposed to look like, or your body, what your body was supposed to look like, all of it is there. So it's like the belonging blueprint becomes, can we create such clarity for the architecture that you're building your life with? And the architecture is the belief structure.
Right.
Like, can we make it so clear to be like, this has been living in your walls the whole time? Can we expose what the walls have inside of them and decide, do I want to keep that in my structure or do I want to replace it with something else and remodel a little bit? So then, if you think about it that way, in terms of the belief being like the primary basis, then everything is more effectively built on top of the belief structure. And then things start to shift a lot faster.
Yeah, of course.
So I wanted to loop that in.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great.
So, as you are also, I want to highlight this. So, you've been inside of our group containers for about 2 years, and I've said this many times, but I also just want to share it out loud. You inside of a group structure, to me, anchor the group in authenticity. I really do feel that when you show up in a group container and you share, it's from such an authentic place that gives everyone else the permission to share from that place as well. And this is really where I find you as a community member and community learning to be so valuable and transformative because when we have individuals like you who share in such a beautifully authentic way, and then we have other community members who get like an example of that, a map of that, it gives everyone else permission to begin to do the same. And it's just so beautiful. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I'm also so curious what it's been like for you to be in like a community learning container like this over the last 2 years.
Life giving.
Mhm.
Yeah. I grew up in a dance company. I started dancing when I was 8 years old. I was in a troupe and then I was in another troupe and then I was in a company. And so I always joke that I'm a team sport guy, but like, don't give me a ball. I have nothing to do with sports. I just like the vibe. So I've been, I think on a personal journey to find belonging within myself for a
Mm,
really long time. And it's something that I've always kind of sought externally to like fill in these gaps and fill in these holes. And one of them is a company, one of them is a group. But,
mm,
I don't dance anymore. I've retired. I'm not part of a dance company. And that's okay. That chapter is closed. But I've needed that feeling and that collective because I
mhm,
grew up learning in a group. I grew up walking in a group. I grew up, so I think back to the authentically being open and vulnerable in a group. I was teaching when I was 18. I was teaching over 20 classes a week, over 30 people in a class, and I was 18 and all of my
wow,
students were not. I had a whole bunch of adults. And
mhm.
so I remember, distinctly being like, "Do you guys have any questions?" And 30 adults. So it's something that I think is so important as a
Mhm,
as a student and as a community member to like
mhm.
let the teachers and let the people who are holding the space know like you're not alone out there because I did feel even though I was, a
Yeah.
studio full of people, I felt so alone because I would ask these questions and I wouldn't get any engagement.
Mm,
And so I think that's something that I've kind of made my life's mission because of how I felt
yeah,
to like
yeah,
reach back to people and really reach back and try to connect and try to give
mm,
because you're choosing to teach, you're choosing to hold this space, you're choosing to run the green door in this beautiful capacity. And when you're leading a group, you're leading the group. And so it's like I do think it's important to show up authentically for
yeah,
that. That was a sideline point. Oh,
yeah,
the being in group. Yeah, it all comes back to that. It's amazing. It's been so wonderful to be back in a group and be back in community. And I'm not the one teaching. I'm not the one holding space. And so that's super great to be able to like jump in and be like, oh, what are we doing? Cool. What are we doing over here? Sweet. Okay, cool. This is what we're talking about now. Awesome. Like I'm on board. And it's been really so wonderful. There are women that I met in the nutrition course 2 years ago that are inside of this belonging blueprint. And, people that have been inside of different group containers and inside of different conversations that I feel we really intimately know each other.
mhm.
Because, the stuff that we're unpacking and the layers of onions that we're peeling back are so very real
Yes,
and so very vulnerable. Like the conversations that we have in these calls, I don't know that some people are having these conversations elsewhere.
exactly.
To be able to
Mhm,
have the safety to open up, to explore really what feels like some of like the darkest depths.
mm,
The fact that we're now having this conversation that's going to be in a public forum, I think really
mhm,
speaks volumes to
mhm,
that of I've I have come to you in my most vulnerable state.
mhm,
Nutrition is hard for me. I've been a curvy girl. I've had like those
mhm.
are deep rooted issues. But the really cool thing about it is once you open up about it, she has that issue and she has that issue and she's carrying
Yes.
that. Like I feel so much less alone because we're able to see each other and just be like, oh my God, you guys, like let me tear myself open and just like expose my guts. And then everyone else is like, oh my God, me too.
Yes,
And I think
exactly.
that's so cool to be able to have those types, because there's many, of
Yes.
conversations and of moments. And I think it's also sweet that people allow that too and allow that witnessing to be able to be seen in that way. Because, one of the conversations we were having was about pain. And I think it's everybody experiences pain, headache, nausea. We have bodies, right? We live in these meat suits, these beautiful vessels
Yeah.
that are meat suits that we have to take care of. And
Mhm,
we have external factors that affect them. And it happens to all of us, but
mhm.
we're all supposed to walk through the world these like perfect specimens that don't have issues ever and everything's fine all the time, right? And
Yeah.
that's like not the
Uh-huh.
case
Not the
at
case at
all.
all.
And so it was so interesting talking about pain, how everyone's like, when I'm in pain, I go away. I close up. I don't want to give it to anybody else. I don't want to let anybody see me in this way.
Yep. Mhm.
And that's what I think is very interesting about these different containers is so many people are allowing people to see
Mhm.
into these moments that really allow for such genuine, beautiful connections. I mean, I don't quite have the words for it because it is something that is so uniquely special that it's like in the world, we are a community driven species, right? We need people and family and connections, and our society is not structured for that. I was
Right.
just talking to my friend about that the other day. We were out at breakfast and church let out,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden the streets are filled with people.
Mhm.
And, it's so interesting how that has become a pinnacle for
Mhm.
belonging. It's been a place that so many people collectively find their belonging in this. And if
Mhm.
you don't resonate with that, then that's not the avenue for you. And
Yes.
you don't get that. And that's
Yeah.
what I find is so interesting that you're like, we love this connection, this group. That's why we're on teams. We play
Mm.
sports,
Mhm.
And so to be able to find a group that you're like going through this work, this authentic, deep,
Mhm.
real work
Yes.
is really cool because I feel it's rare. And
Yeah.
I know that you have a much longer journey in, different pathways and education forms. And this has,
Mhm.
your life's work has kind of like waved in this. Mine has kind of, it waves in and out of it that I would assume that you found these groups a little bit more, but maybe not. And maybe that's why you created it. And
Mm.
it's so special. I was talked to my friends about this and a couple of friends were like, that sounds like a cult. And I'm like, shit, I'm not explaining this right. Okay. That's my bad. Okay. Hold on. Let me back up. And, I talked to my sister-in-law about this and my sister-in-law has been involved in the conversations with me since we've reconnected.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're in a coaching circle, Kendra. That's
Yeah.
what we call it. You tell the normies outside you're in a coaching circle
Oh
because
my
they
god.
can understand that, where it's like, what are you're in another class? Why are you in another class? Because it's awesome.
It's
What do
so
you
funny.
mean? Yeah, it's funny, and I explained the like dance company that I grew up to be cult like because we
Uh-huh.
had to have the same nail polish, the same toenail color. My
Oh.
hair had to be long. I wasn't
Mm.
allowed any facial piercings. You could only have one piercing in your ear. Very, very specific rules that I
Yeah.
grew up under. And
Wow.
so I think I've always kind of sought those rules because they provide that safety in that
Ah.
container.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting now to be in a container that's like, here's this container, and these are the guidelines that we're going to set, but there are not rules here. There is no right and wrong. There is
Right.
no should and shouldn't. And in
Mhm.
dance, there is a right and wrong, and
Oh,
there
yeah.
is a should and shouldn't.
Very much so.
And
Mhm.
so it's so interesting coming from such a strong background. I think I tried to apply that meaning to all of my life, and that does not work.
Right.
Food is not good or bad.
Mm-mm.
You know,
Mhm.
being vulnerable is not good or bad. It just is. And I
Mhm.
think that's what all of these spaces have provided is this safety and security in just being, in just the is, in just what is. This is how you're arriving. That's great. Let's
Mhm.
work with that. Not,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I don't think I've ever heard anybody inside of, Green Door, and people even ask you, what should I eat? And you're like, I don't know. What do you want to eat? What sounds good to you?
The most
People want
annoying
the
response.
rules. People
Yeah.
people like to, I think again, that's why we search this greater collective is because some people need that spoon feeding. Some people need that it should be like this. It should look like this. These are the rules. This is how we should engage.
Mhm.
Because I think we're looking for those communities and we're looking for those collectives. So if we get that and it comes with rules, you're like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah. Right.
just
Just
fall in line with
form into the rules, and then that's security and predictability, and yeah.
it." Yeah.
Well, to give some of the I mean, this is so interesting about cults. After this, I'm gonna research a little bit, like, what
Let's do it.
specifically
I want to know
is a
too. Yeah.
what specifically is a cult? I'm gonna put it in the show notes. Anyways,
Great.
so I think you said something really interesting, which is whether or not I've experienced this in any of the coaching containers that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of many, like, many, many different types of trainings, whether it was professional or personal. I have yet to find a space where the nothing is off limits to talk about, where absolutely everything is okay to discuss and any emotion is okay to be had during discussion. And even if you get triggered by something, like there was actually something that I shared that was a very personal and very like almost taboo subject for mainstream, right? An experience that I had. And let's just say if it's a taboo subject for mainstream, people are going to get triggered by it,
Of course.
right? Because it triggers all of our judgments and beliefs around what is okay and what's not okay. And should we be talking about this or should we not? Right.
The worst word, there we go.
That's right. And all of the internal, unique stories that get turned on based on somebody's share. And so after I shared this personal story, I got multiple reflections in private DMs or in the group chat. And I just got to watch how everyone responded so uniquely to this one share that wasn't a part of their experience, but we were all able to talk about why it was triggering them.
Mhm.
Right. And so, as we discuss in the belonging blueprint to give people a little bit of a framework. So, in the belonging blueprint, we are working with the concept that we developed archetypes of belonging, the people pleaser, the controller, the performer, the entertainer, the achiever. Hello. And how all of these archetypes of belonging were intelligent designs that we created to survive our earlier upbringing with the type of parenting that we had. And we will contain a little version of all of them. However, some of them will be more prevalent in certain relationships and certain periods of our life. So it's not like we are only one. We will have a little bit of all of them. They're just archetypes of survival and they will correspond with our nervous system and activation of our nervous system. So what's really interesting is that if we are still working with some of these archetypal survival strategies, they will likely be in the unconscious running our life. So when we have a story like this that comes out in one of these conversations, how our archetype responds to the story can tell us where we are still operating in the unconscious. So where one person has an experience of, well, I was really triggered, but I haven't had anything like that that's similar happen to me. But I just found that I wasn't able to stay in my body and I was disassociating. I was like, well, isn't that interesting that your system had that
Yeah.
response, right? And so, where else do you remember disassociating in your life? And then from that, it just opens up this map and this gateway where, with community learning or community coaching, it's not about actually like there's a lot of content that I give everyone to learn and to kind of give like a framework because I know that we love to have a framework, we love to have an architecture, but the actual real value of this container is in learning from each other and using each other as a mirror. Right. So, as you're having your experience and I'm responding to your experience, like just in my appreciation with your authenticity, I am very aware that there's a part of me that is still looking to find a complete authenticity that sees it in you. So I project, wow, that's so cool. And because you're giving me the mirror. Also, it could happen in the other way. I could see your authenticity and it could trigger me negatively. And I could be like, oh my God, I can't believe that she said that because it's so, but that's something for me to investigate. You know what I mean? So it's like inside of these containers, what I find so freaking powerful and so cool is that when the safety of the container is that everything is welcome and we're coming with curiosity to where these unconscious patterns and beliefs are running our life, then every conversation is a way to explore new wisdom that's coming online within our own system. And I have not experienced a container like that before.
Cool.
So
That's really cool.
yeah, I'm like very, very excited for it, which is why I'm extending it into a monthly circle that's not a cult.
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna define cult.
We're
We're
going
gonna
to
go look
define
that
cult.
up. But Shannon, I think that's so interesting that it's something that you have not found or been a part of. And as somebody who's inside of it, where I'm like, she must have had a example of this, or this must be something that she's part of. and that it's not come from that external, that's come from internal, from wanting to create a space that is that safe, that is
Mm,
that open, that is that accepting. And it's, I think it's so true. As somebody who's inside of this and who's been inside of multiple different containers with you, I don't think there's a place in my life that I've felt it okay to show up authentically with strangers.
mm. Yeah.
I'm looking up because I'm like going into my
Yeah.
head. I'm like searching my memories, and like my best friend comes to mind of sitting on her couch or sitting with my wife, or, having
Uh-huh.
these really beautiful, soft, intimate, tender moments with people where you allow
Yeah.
those walls to drop and you allow that like soft belly to come out.
Yeah.
And to do like, I guess I didn't really know that I struggled with anxiety.
Yeah.
Somebody kind of named it.
Uh-huh.
I had a my general practitioner in Chattanooga was like, "You have generalized anxiety disorder." Me? What? And then looking back and being like, that was anxiety. That's how that showed up. And, I think about that like going into a networking group. I think that's somebody that I think that's an experience every adult can kind of connect with is
Mm,
let's go to a networking event. I'm a business
mhm,
professional. I have to go talk to other business professionals and tell them why I'm good enough for them to
mhm,
hire me. There's so much that's layered on top of that, that going in, I would always be like, how do I even talk? What do I even, and just getting kind of tongue tied going into that, I think it's been so interesting having this place that I'm able to show up in my robe with my hair in whatever form it's in, eating or drinking or, whatever type of need that I have to be able to show up is
mhm,
accepted and welcomed. That now is trickling into my life in other ways of being able to show up authentically and not having this anxiety that I'm placing on other people. Oh, they're the boss.
uh-huh,
They're better than me and I need to show up in a certain way. Like it's allowed me through
mm,
practicing in these conversations of showing up authentically, because that is really who I am. Like I do show up, but it gets I don't know if like shrouded by coping mechanisms is the right word, but I
yeah.
think that's kind of what it feels like there. I end up freezing
Uh-huh.
or fawning because
Yeah.
I'm so anxious that I just lock up, and it's like there's this thing on the outside of me that doesn't allow who I am to actually be there and arrive in that way. And through having these conversations where we're allowed, see, that's funny,
Mhm.
the shoulds and the allows and the supposed to's and all
Right. I
these,
know.
you know,
Yep.
where there is the space given and welcomed and held
Mhm,
to show
mhm,
up as we are,
mhm,
that for me has now been able to trickle into life in a very different way. And
mhm.
so it is so special to be able to show up inside of these groups and have that accepting of being like, you're bawling? Awesome. You're angry? Great. You're dissociating? Cool. Let's talk about that, where it's like really meeting everybody where they are. You don't want to talk because you get shot. Great. Cool. Pop it in the chat. Like, what do you have to say? Like, there
Yeah.
is no incorrect way to be and to exist. And societally, there is. And we all have so much to battle against, is the words that's coming out. So that's interesting that it thinks of it like that, to battle against, just to
Uh-huh.
show up as who we are
Yeah.
in daily life. And we have to have these really unique, special containers to provide this safety net to like
Mm,
coax us out to be able to exist without all of these external things placed upon us.
yeah. I'm
It
so
just seems special.
I mean, I'm so glad that you brought that out, how it's as you're sharing it to me, we are creating a map through the experience within a safe container that gives us an understanding of how we actually get to show up through authentic belonging with ourselves first and how we get to show up with that and carry it into our life.
Yeah.
So, just like we are creating new opportunities for maps and hearing other people's stories, hearing how we get triggered or react to similar or different things. What I love about the group container is it broadens our perspective of what's possible and what different options are,
Totally.
right? And so, what we've talked about before is that usually when we're triggered in our nervous system will give us like two options. Like, we got two options. You're either going to blow up the world or you're going to people please. or, it's just these two things. And when we start to have these conversations and to understand the nervous system programming and to create that sense of safety that allows us to connect with our bodies and essentially discover new options for ourselves, whether they're coming from inside of us or through what someone else has shared, then just as you're sharing, that gets to map the rest of our life.
Yeah.
And we get to take it with us into the rest of our life. And to be honest, like when I think about what's most important, at least for myself in my life, I want to be able to show up wherever the fuck I am as who the fuck I am. I want to, like, I remember going to like a barbecue the other day and me wearing almost all leopard print. It's not super like me,
Love you, Shannon.
but I just kind of looked down and I had a hat and like a skirt. And like, I was like, it's all leopard. Okay. This is
All
how we're
right.
rolling. This is- And I was aware that I was looking around at like, what other people were wearing and the other women. And I was like, this one is not like the others. I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. And that is coming online for me at the same time as it's coming for everyone else at the same time.
Cool.
Right. Cause I really feel like
Special.
it's just, it's happening simultaneously. Just because I'm holding the container doesn't mean that I'm not a part of the transformation that's happening collectively. And I love that we're having this call as we move into the topic of groups and archetypal patterns, because as we move into a true sense of authentic belonging within ourselves, it changes how we show up with everyone in our life. And that can be a little sticky initially because it's like, this is one analogy I say. Let's say that we grew up our entire life and someone was trying to tell us that we were a tree.
Mhm.
They were like, look at you, you're a tree. You act like this, you look like this, you're a tree. And if you don't feel like you're a tree, you're supposed to be a tree. So look, we're just going to keep trying to make you a tree over and over again. Look, you're a tree. Look, you're a
Yep.
tree. And you're like, okay, okay, I'm going to be a tree. And then one day you look in a mirror or something and you're like, oh my God, I am a rose. Hold on.
Yep.
What's happening? I was told that I was a tree, people trying to like fit me into the tree group, like I was trying to get like tree fertilizer, like
Right.
all of these things, and all of a sudden, wait, I am a freaking rose, and people have
Yeah.
been trying to tell me I've been this other thing. So what I'm noticing is like as our true authentic belonging comes online and we're starting to see ourselves the most clearly without all of the old beliefs, I call them distortions, like distorted ideas of who we are because it's coming through a filter of our culture, our society, our parents, our peers. And when we start to excavate those distortions and release them and come back to actually seeing us how we truly are, we get to walk in any scenario and be like, I'm home because I'm home. And so I get to be authentically me because there's no other option now. And that to me at this point in my life is like the most important teaching and the most valuable teaching.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, because then everything else just it arrives from that place of authentic belonging.
Yeah.
Food, body composition, all of that stuff ends up being like, "No, I choose this because I choose this because this is true to who I am today."
Yeah.
And then all those steps that we were talking about taking, whether it's through nutrition or through strength training or through emotional release or any sort of self-care or a hair journey, it's all like, how do I relate to these steps today based on who I am today?
Yeah. Allowing that freedom to change. I think
Yes.
that's something you talk about often is that who I am today doesn't have to dictate who I am tomorrow and
Mhm.
not getting kind of stuck in those grooves, and I think that's kind of some of the work is we get these shoulds and these supposed tos from a certain age, be it from our parents, from our peers, from, anything
Mhm.
that you just stick in those grooves of shoulds, and so it's like we have to, like, climb our way out, flatten the grooves, redo the surface, repave it, like, make this
Yeah.
new way that we can interact, and then from there, there's that freedom to accept whatever is, and I think that is also another really beautiful point that you make often of accepting what is.
Mhm.
Because yes, we're trying to show up as authentically as we can, but we get to take that time to check in with ourselves that day to be like, do I feel 100% today?
Mhm.
No, I don't. Am I going to show up today the same that I did yesterday? I'm not, because I don't have it. And even like that allows the expectations to even come off in another layer off of yourself of like,
Mhm.
oh, I figured out who I am. This is who I am. And you're like,
Right.
this is who we are is still very flexible and malleable. And I think being open to that and open to the listening
Mhm.
is so important.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. It's everything. Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that up to reflect it and to bring into the conversation because we are changing every single moment of our life. Like nothing in nature is consistent, you
Mhm,
know? And so I think when we expect that we are going to wake up and be the same every single day, like a machine, we're just not. Like we are nature and we're consistently evolving every single day.
mhm.
Yeah. Um I'm working with a teacher right now who just shared recently how every single moment we are going through like a death and rebirth cycle.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Big deal.
No big deal, but the way that he was describing it, he was like, everything is a transition, and we're always essentially in an opportunity if we so choose. Like, after we have this podcast, I will go into the transition of the death of who I was on this podcast and the birth of who I will be after this podcast. And how easily can I let go of the identity that was here and then embrace the next identity that comes afterwards? And that where we come into these kind of fixed resistance experiences is where we are so attached to some of the past identities that we cannot let go of or cannot allow to be fluid,
Mhm.
or the shoulds, the supposed tos, the
Yeah.
why didn't yous of whatever it is in our life, like whether it's around nutrition or strength training or body composition. I know that so many women, and myself included, have gotten to a point where they're like, "Oh, I did this when I was XYZ age, and now I'm trying to do the same thing. Why isn't it working?"
Yes.
And I will say very gently,
Mhm.
because you are a different human. Your life is different, your environment is different, your relationships are different, your hormones are different. Likely where you live on the planet might be slightly different. You might have children, you might have whatever, have parents, you might not have parents.
Mhm.
Like everything has changed, and therefore you have changed, and therefore your strategies will need to shift also. And it's just so interesting where if we don't have that external, almost like invitation, or for some people, the ability to say, hey, that's normal. Like all of that is going to change, in which case your strategy and steps to support yourself will also have to change.
Yeah.
And letting that be like, okay, so then it actually gets to be consistent discovery and curiosity.
Mhm.
And it's like, hmm. So thank you for bringing that, like consistently changing,
Yeah.
and that that's a part of what we're going through every single day and every single moment. And I think what that points to as well is it invites an opportunity to be curious instead of in a fixed state of this is supposed to, it should look like this today.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I brought it up because it's something that you've said and you share and you continue to that I find to be very important. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, this leading by example and, having your strength training coach share her own experience of, I don't want to strength train today.
Hmm.
Shannon has days like that. Cool. Again, because we all place our own stories onto other people too. They have it all
Yes,
figured out. They're
yes.
perfect. Their body composition is, like, so it's like not only do we have a chance to discover our journey and our differences and where we are, we also get that about other people as well. And taking
Yes.
that time to like pause and reflect through those, I mean, it is vulnerable. It is those vulnerable shares of being like, I am a strength training coach and I didn't want to strength train today.
Totally.
I think that takes vulnerability to share and to be able to see that and to, be in that container and be like, my body wanted to go for a walk today. And do you know what? It was awesome. And even having the wherewithal to feel that and to look at that and to ask those questions, I
Mhm.
think allows so much more freedom and flexibility for other people that are, kind of not following along in the journey, but like you house you house a coaching container
Yeah.
for nutrition and for strength training. Now it's evolving and there are many more things involved in it, but in its like nuts and bolts, that's what
Mhm.
it is. So then to be able to see and hear and have your journey shared within that, I think allows so much more availability for authenticity for people to show up.
Like,
People being like, I missed a strength training workout. And you're like, cool. How do you feel? Was it
yes,
nice?
yes,
Instead of being like,
yes,
this is strength training workout.
right?
You're definitely gonna die now. You're like,
Yeah,
"What's gonna happen?"
yeah.
The world is not gonna end if I decide to go on a walk today instead of doing something that I, had planned and scheduled, and I think that it's just a beautiful reflection of that and a beautiful example of
Mhm.
that and the way in which we can take these little golden nuggets and integrate them into our lives as ways in which it is okay to walk through the world. Because I think that that's part of
Mm,
that belonging, either belonging to yourself, belonging to somebody else, belonging to a container is that acceptance and that,
mm,
we are walking on the right path or we are doing what is okay or, that we're feeling solace in that. And, just being able to have those moments like that to be able to see that somebody else is walking the same journey alongside you it's just so helpful.
I'm so happy to hear that, and it's so interesting because, of course, I live within my own body, and I love that you're taking the projections that we will place onto other people, and you're
It's
bringing that.
so important.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and so those projections will show up in both how we see people and then how we hear people,
Right.
which is so, so interesting, and to be able to identify the projections that we have onto celebrities. I mean, we all do it,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Especially if we only have like a certain version of what we perceive their life to look like, which will come through our field of perception, our lens. But on this point, to share like inside of my own journey and inside of my own body, I've been on such an interesting journey of being so regimented for so long, which I was definitely very regimented for a very long time. And while I was regimented, I was also drinking a lot of alcohol, which is a very interesting combination, right? I was not only extremely regimented, I was also in my late 20s. So I feel like that was helpful.
I mean,
I mean, just like the fact that I was able to recover and like wake up at 6 in the morning, and like have all of these training clients. Anywho, and then to start to go on this journey of really feeling that my body was like, I think this is why everyone needs a coach because we can't see the back of our own head,
right.
right? So I would know how to share all of these things with everyone else. And yet I would still be having my own experience with my own blind spots, right? So I would show up to training and perhaps I just wouldn't be giving myself enough rest. And then all of a sudden, I would just totally tank, and I wouldn't know why. And the same sort of thing with anxiety. Like, I realized that I was actually dealing with like chronic anxiety, didn't know it. And just understanding all of those things, especially over the last 3 to 4 years. And then now, having built the awareness of, well, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so now I have a map that I can further share with everyone else. But just for anyone who's listening, I want you guys all to know, let me see. I strength train 2 to 3 days a week. I try to walk as much as I can. I usually have at least a cookie a day. I have pizza multiple times a week. I don't drink alcohol anymore. Sometimes I roll hand rolled raw tobacco and I love it. Absolutely love it. What else? Psilocybin is part of my journey. There's all of these things, but I have certain things that are like structured and certain things that I'm like, this is what I'm exploring right now, right? I don't drink alcohol anymore. I do explore raw tobacco now, which is really interesting. And it's also really interesting for me because it is so contradictory to the vision of a health and fitness expert, right? It's so contradictory to that. At this point, I'm like, but there's something like everything has infinite ways that it can look. And it gets to be specific to the individual and it gets to be what works for them,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's the bigger thing that I wanna be able to at least be a model for or a map that it doesn't have to look fucking perfect, you know? And it can look like so many different things. And we are the only people that get to decide what actually works for us, and no one else's blueprint is our blueprint, you know?
I think that's the essence of it, and I think that's why sharing as that expert of, like, "I don't feel like training today." I, like, watched the brains break of everybody in that, like, I watched us all be like, "That's okay," you
Yeah.
know? And you're like, "Yeah, of course it's okay." We all get to have that journey, and I think it just by leading by example and by leading with that vulnerability and that openness, it allows for other people to witness that map and witness that it is okay to have your journey look however it
Mm.
needs to look.
Yeah. And it's all like, we are the only ones that are living our lives, you know? And I think it's so common that we feel like the external imposition of what it's supposed to look like takes over our decisions. And I mean, you guys, I feel for all of us because I'm inside of this conversation, but that's not really a very exciting life.
No.
It's
It's
a
not.
it's a frustrating and exhausting life, you
Yeah.
know? So I think about like when we allow ourselves to understand what it means to nourish, like actually from a place of self-love and respect, if we are able to arrive there. Because for a lot of us, just the self-love and self-respect is something that we're battling with.
Right, yeah.
But I
There's
feel like that battle is also because we are in direct opposition with what we think we're supposed to be.
mm,
And so we're trying to love something that is a projected archetype instead of going like, "Oh, but I am actually okay just as I am." Like, if I am a business owner who's a fitness whatever, and I also like smoking tobacco sometimes, and then sometimes I don't go to the gym, and I also don't drink alcohol, and I love donuts, and all of these like different things, that actually gets to be okay because it's okay for me, and it doesn't have to be okay for anyone else. But that's what works for my body in my season today. That could change tomorrow.
right?
You know, and just having like the awareness. But I think what's really cool about what we get to do inside of all of the things that we do in the green door life, but just having authentic conversations like this is that the more authentic conversations we have, the more we actually get a demonstration of all of the options that are available.
Yeah, of course.
And then we get to start to go, well, what does that look like for me? And what do I want to choose from conscious awareness, not because someone says that I should or shouldn't, you know? And that to me is the juice that we're creating.
Yeah. Yeah, and not coming from a triggered nervous system state. Like you said, when your nervous system is triggered, you have 2 options.
Mhm.
And so having these conversations, having these moments of vulnerability, of authenticity, of discovery allows the nervous system to drop, allows that anxiety that runs in the background that you're completely unconscious of to come to the forward and be conscious and be like, "Oh, well, I was anxious because I didn't actually wanna do that." Good
Yes.
to know.
Yes.
And then it allows, it allows those choices to come forward. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's really like you said, where the whole belonging blueprint came from for you was being able to explore. Maybe I'm not putting a nice little bow. This is one of the pieces of where it
Yeah.
came from. I
Yeah.
can't say it's all of it, but it's
Yeah.
helping to create those choices and
Yeah.
understanding those sides that kind of live in the darkness and live in the unconscious and not looking at it and being aware of it because that's there, that is really driving something forward that doesn't allow those choices to come forward.
Yes.
And how cool
Mhm.
that we get to unravel all of that to live a much more beautiful life of
Yeah. Yes. It's so good. The
yeah,
choices, man.
yeah,
Man, when we had those calls, I was like, choice, you guys, awareness, choice, and freedom.
yeah,
Yeah. And thank you for bringing in the nervous system. I think this is a part of the architecture that we actually get to understand that is part of our unique architecture. Like our it's part of the running mechanism inside of our body. And to what you're sharing, when we make decisions from different nervous system states, it really, when we're able to see that that nervous system component is active, it helps us to have a little bit less guilt and shame about what we're experiencing and have a lot more compassion of like, oh, this is an activated nervous system state. Like stress is not an idea. Stress is actually your system is going through a physiological transition. And it's either holding it for long periods of time or it's acute in a fight or flight state. And when we can have that kind of awareness, especially with a group and to see how it shows up for different people in different ways, then we can start to bring that into our relationships and really go, you are shutting down because your body is in a complete freeze state and it's overwhelmed and it's at capacity. So here are the tools that we can bring in that can help to regulate, not by making you wrong for like being lazy or having judgment around it. You know what I mean? Like there's all of these different, very limited judgments and perceptions that I think we have, as a culture, have placed on activated nervous systems
For
and
sure.
made them super, super wrong. But in fact, it's actually a physiological response to the perceived environment or the happenings of that situation. So the nervous system conversation is massive. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think it's, it's all part of it. And it's, there's little things that you bring up that I'm like, oh yeah, this part too, that
Yes. Hi.
some really great conversations and a lot of really great tools and unfolding and information that's come from all of the work that, we've been a
Mm,
part of in the past couple of years. I mean, for me, obviously new to the green door, this is something that you've done since you've inception of this. That was the up
okay.
with it. But being inside of it has just been such a gift.
I'm so happy that you're inside of it. It's absolutely a pleasure, honor. I have one last question for you,
Sure.
and then we'll sign off. I'm curious, since the belonging blueprint, I think specifically,
Mhm.
how has your relationship to your own nervous system states shifted, if at all?
I think I've arrived with a lot more awareness, understanding, and compassion. I think that it's given me the allowance to have more time and reflection.
Uh-huh.
I always like joke that I'm an internal processor and that's the mind and the heart connection there. I am very heart centered. I am very body focused. And so it takes time for stuff to trickle back up. And so I think this has given me a lot more space and capacity to notice what's happening inside of my body and
Mhm.
have a deeper understanding with it and an allowance with it. Not to say that I have had before, but I think that it really yeah, I think it's the allowance with it. It's that those shoulds and those supposed tos. And it's allowing that arrival in whatever way. And I think that acceptance of who I was yesterday and who I am today and who I am tomorrow, coming from more of a nervous system perspective of, oh, I got emotionally rattled today.
Mhm.
And that emotional rattling has stuck with me all day. And then it
Mhm.
bleeds into the next day. I think this has allowed more softening of those edges, more breathing room into those moments,
Mhm.
more more reflection time to like complete those processes instead of
Mhm.
leaving them open. Where it's like something happens and you get in this triggered nervous system state and you don't know why. And so you end up just like stuck in this loop.
Yeah.
And then having a little bit more space and awareness to be able to complete those loops. I think that's what's happening a little bit more for me inside of my nervous system is those loops are
Mhm.
starting to be able to be completed because I have a bit more of an understanding of where they're coming from instead of like, I'm anxious
Yeah.
because that to me feels like something external that's happening to me because it
Right.
feels out of my control when I
Mhm.
have this anxiety flare up. And then now it's being able to be like, it's not external, that's internal. Okay, where is
Yeah.
this coming from? Why? It allows just this like being able to breathe into things in a different way and have an understanding of things in a different way. And I think the talking about those survival archetypes really allows for a softening and an understanding in the system of why we are the way that we are.
Mhm.
and what we can do with that when those sides of ourself that we're unaware of come up.
Yes.
That happens to all of us. You know, we have these unconscious patterns that are running in the background that when you're able to become aware of them and they become conscious, you can then look at them and deal with them and talk to them in a different way. And
Mhm.
I think having that understanding really allows the body and the mind and the nervous system to drop some of its guards and its hackles from being like, I'm anxious.
Yes. Right. Nowhere to go.
Hey, here I
Mhm.
am, to being like, okay, well, why am I anxious? Where's that
Mm.
coming from? And I felt this in the past. And, that curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. I love to hear you just sharing the internal map that you are starting to live.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just
Totally.
something that, like, you're reciting back because you read it somewhere. You're actually mapping it within your own system, and that is the coolest part because then it becomes a choice that you are giving yourself in those moments, which is then really, like, empowered it's empowerment.
Yeah. I'm trying to understand it. This is big work.
Uh-huh.
It's big,
Totally.
deep work, and it's
Yep.
really great that we're in a container together so we can, like, pop in and be like, "Hey, guys, I was feeling like this," and, to kind of have a little bit more external reflection because I think that is something that I am able to take time for
Mm.
and understand more, and my nervous system has definitely dropped more. But
Mhm.
having support and sisterhood and
For
companionship
sure. Yes.
inside of it, I think is
Yes.
so helpful to have. We have so many mirrors and so many reflections,
Mhm.
um, to be able to understand that I think that's also been incredibly helpful is to have that community support while we're learning how to belong to ourselves and
Yes.
trust ourselves.
Yes.
And yeah,
Absolutely. It's a unfolding process. I mean, we are literally in week 3 of what will likely just continue to be like this most beautiful unfolding of continuing to return home to self, mapping these archetypal patterns, having these mirrors, like the amount of realizations that we've heard just in the group chat and the calls in just 2 weeks.
that's it. It's only been it feels like a lifetime
I know.
has happened for all of us.
I know. It's like it's really miraculous. The insights and the releases and the real-time mapping
Yeah.
in very challenging, like, life transitions and people moving and deaths in the family and, like, just all of these different things that are happening in all of our lives, and people are mapping their emotions and their nervous system in real time and meeting parts of themselves that they haven't met before. Like, it's transformational. It is incredible to watch.
Yes.
And to be a part of.
Yes, absolutely. I feel the
Yeah.
same way completely.
Yeah. But exactly what you're saying, like, I'm actually hearing you talk about how you're mapping it from the inside.
Mhm.
And I think that is just the coolest thing because it's not about something that we're reading. It's something that we are collectively learning together. And that is so cool to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. It's so great.
Yeah.
Okay, my dear, thank you so much for joining for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
So
so good.
lovely.
Hey, yeah. And for those of you who are listening, I hope this gave you guys a lovely little insight into some of the work that we do in our more authentic conversations. And if you are interested in learning more about the Belonging Blueprint or Awaken Your Nutrition or Awaken Your Foundations or any of the other offerings that we currently have going, you can check out the show notes below for all of the details. And again, thank you, Kendra, so much for being here. This is such a gift. And
Thank
thank
you
you,
for
everyone,
having me.
for, yeah. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will catch you next time.